In this video, I'm going to show you some elementary editing building blocks, a beginner's guide to the basics of video editing. This is very much a starting point designed to get you on your way to editing basic sequences. I'm going to be sharing how we go about bolting together a live job that I'm doing as a favour for a friend. The footage in the project was shot on a phone, so it's a really good representation of where you may be starting out on your video creating journey in terms of the kind of footage that you may well be dealing with. Just a couple of quick caveats. Some of this raw footage is pretty compressed, so it won't look as HD as perhaps it should do, but that doesn't affect the basic processes and workflow that I'm going to go through and share with you, because fundamentally they will still be the same. Now, the job itself is a screen test, so in this case the compression is less of an issue because effectively the video will be for internal use only. It won't be broadcast or shown outside of the organization, so it's not an external facing video which would be representing a business to the outside world. So with all that said, let's dive into the content. So the key to editing really is it's all about keeping yourself organized in a way. So here we are, I am in the editing software. This happens to be Adobe Premiere, it's what I use, but a lot of the editing software has similar sort of features and areas. The aim of this is to illustrate how to cut in a very, very basic way and the basic constituent parts of an edit, how to sequence pictures together to start to make sense in a narrative way. As I was saying, in terms of being organized, one of the best ways of doing that is to make sure that you have bins. Bins are where you can store your archive footage, or your rushes as they're known. This one, so I've got one called video. I am going to create another bin because for this particular job I have got some stills, so I will create a bin for them. I've not got anything in the video bin at the moment, so the first thing I am going to do is to get the footage into the editing software. So off I jolly well go and do that. I need to remember where I put it. Right, so here we are. We have got lots of stuff there. All these .movs are the video files and the JPEGs are the images. So I'm going to import the video files and they will go and miraculously plop themselves like that into the video bin. We will do the same with the images, the JPEGs. So I've got 3 cheeky little JPEGs here. Let's get those in. Brilliant. Right, now we can start creating the timeline and placing the images and the footage onto the timeline. So first what I need to do is create a sequence. This is very much designed as a first look at editing basics rather than a deep dive into what settings I'm using for what and how to create certain looks or whatever. For the sake of today's project, I'm literally just importing footage that was shot on a phone and clipping it together so that it makes some kind of sense. I've created a sequence. So this area here is the timeline. This is where I'm going to put all of the clipped up little sections of footage. So let's go and have a look at what we have got. Now, I have to be honest, I haven't seen anything yet. So this is a voyage of discovery. So here we are, I have just popped the first clip onto the timeline and we can scrub through it. Right, so first of all, I am thinking that's not a particularly amazing starting frame. Now this is me being, you know, you have to understand I'm being quite hypercritical. This is no disrespect at all to my friend who shot this on her phone. But I think I'd probably start about there just so we get rid of that person who's in shot and we cut straight to the move. What's nice about this shot is it is a slightly wider, what we call an establishing shot. It tells you where you are, it gives you a sense of context. As you notice, that Meryl then pans round to reveal the presenter, Joe, but by doing that you know where you are, so you know where the story is set. So I've just butted the second clip up next to the first clip, and oh, it looks very small. Now the reason this is because for some reason the phone settings changed between Mariel shooting this clip, which is at 1080, it looks nice and crisp and high definition, and this, I wonder whether the phone was turned around into the other mode, I'm not sure, but for some reason it isn't going to play back at the full resolution. Now obviously if you were able to, we'd do a retake at this point. This just illustrates the fact that you need to make sure every time you're filming on your phone that you just double check the settings are the same. So if you've done a take and there's time elapsed between you having done that first take and you doing the second take, so just before you start calling action, just make sure mentally, go through in your head, check that all the settings are what they should be, so you avoid a situation like this where you get a very, very small resolution file that's come through. However, for the sake of this actual project, it's not a problem. All we need to do is scale it up. But by doing that, we will be losing definition. As you can see, when you compare it to the clip that's before, nice and 1080, nice and crisp, high definition, and that is pixelated. But for the sake of what we want here, this will be okay. It's just to get a sense of Joe's expertise, which I think will be fine. However, it is a lesson to make sure that when you're shooting stuff on your phone, you just keep checking that the settings are the correct filming settings. So I've just sense checked what Joe's saying, and I have nipped out any pauses or any ers or erms just to make the narrative flow a bit better. So let's just have a look.
Past, there's lots of people, even the occasional alarm going off. Even so, there's still plenty of wildlife to see.
And in this section here, he goes on to talk about micro worlds and being on the pavement. Let's just have a listen.
Micro worlds, for example, down here on the path.
Right, at this point, obviously the camera is still trained on Joe, which is fine because he's talking. But at this point as a viewer, I want to see what he's talking about, i.e. I want to see the path. So what I need to do at this point as an editor is go and put in a cutaway, is what it's called. Cutaways are shots like this one here, which are filmed afterwards or before. What you'd normally do is you'd film the presenter talking and referring to various things, and then afterwards you'd scoot about and film cutaways of the things that they were referring to. That's standard practice in the industry. So here we've got a lovely cutaway of the path that Joe is referring to. What I need to do then is to cut a little portion of this shot and overlay it, so when Joe refers to the path, miraculously the viewer sees the path in question. So here we go. That's a path, definitely, isn't it? I think it makes sense that you don't see his finger because he stood up in the other shot. So it would make no sense to have him, if he stood up in one of the shots, to then see his finger miraculously sort of poking into the frame on the path. It just wouldn't make sense.
For example, down here on the path.
There you go. So suddenly that then makes sense because you're expecting to see the path as soon as Joe refers to it. So with the addition of a cutaway here, it makes sense. That is one of the staple editing points, the notion that if something is referred to, you show the viewer what the presenter was talking about. So that is cutaways for you. You'll notice as well, just very quickly, that obviously here there is no audio. So when I went through and selected the clips and clipped them up, obviously the cutaways, I'm not going to need the audio that came with the cutaways because they are only ever going to be overlaid over the voiceover, the big bit of Joe talking about what it is. So with cutaways, you very, very rarely need the audio. But that then means it's a nice bridging shot.
Down here on the path, it's a well-trodden path.
It's a lovely bridging shot now into the next sequence where he goes into more detail about the path. Again, here we've got a sequence where Joe is talking about swifts. Now,
April and May, and they depart.
this is quite a long sequence. It's probably about, maybe a minute long or something. A minute is an awfully long time to keep the same shot. Look, you can see, same shot. I've clipped out a little and an here, but it would be a very long and quite monotonous sequence. What I need to do again is find cutaways that I can illustrate the swifts that he's talking about. In this case, they're stills, so I need to go and find the stills, which I can then import here. So there you go, there is a nice swift. Now let's work out where to put it.
I'm just watching some swifts flying over. Now this is a really beautiful aerodynamic scythe-shaped species.
I think we put it there. Oh, we put it there because he is referring to them. Let's give that a little sense check.
Scythe-shaped species, which visits us in the summer months.
Actually, that's a bit too late. As soon as he says, my sense is it's size-like species, then you want to see what he's talking about because he's referring to the shape of them.
Which visits us in the summer months. They arrive in late April.
And we've seen enough of it. With stills and things, you tend to want to allow a minimum of about 3 seconds for people to really sort of absorb the information. And also, it does need to be driven by the narration underneath. You don't want to be staring at any one shot for too long. That's the whole point here. So let's just do another little sense check.
Which visits us in the summer months. They arrive in late April and May, and they depart July, August. They need...
Now, this is an issue that you're going to come across a lot. The first thing you do when you start to assemble things on a timeline like this is you go through and obviously you take out all the pauses, all the anything that they messed up or whatever. So you will end up with lots of what are called jump cuts like this.
July, August. They need...
Where I've taken something out, but it's pretty much the same shot. Things have moved around the frame slightly. Now, you can either leave it, lots of people just leave the transition like that. For this particular project, actually that would have been fine. I think that if you're doing stuff and there are jump cuts in there, a way to smooth over the jump cuts, you've got two options. You either find something to cut away to that makes sense. Now, in this case, we could go and find another still or bit of library footage of a swift, which maybe we will do that. Or if you don't have that option, then what you need to look at is a transition other than something like a jump cut. The jump cut is quite jarring, and especially if you've had to do a lot of editing and trimming within the sequence, you can have multiple jump cuts in any one sequence and it just looks a little bit jarring after a while. So in this case, let's assume we don't have any other footage that we can use to do a cutaway with. So what I'd need to do then is to go and make a transition slightly less jarring on the eye. So in this case, I'm going to use a dissolve. Now let's have a look at this.
July, August. They need...
So you see it's a lot less jarring.
They need...
It fades from one shot to the next, which is not too bad. Now, in this case, I think the dissolve takes way too long. So I'm going to shorten the transition just so that it's not jarring, but we crack on with it. Otherwise, it feels like it's just taking a bit too long.
They need...
That feels pretty good. So there we have it. You have clipped up your sequence. You've taken out any and and compressed any ponderous bits that you want to speed up. And you've arrived at a sequence that makes sense. You've then gone and got cutaways that make sense in terms of what is being talked about in the narrative. And anytime you can't cut away to anything, you've then smoothed out the transitions, you've smoothed out those jump cuts so they become less jarring. I really hope you got loads of value from that tutorial. If you did, please do make sure you smash that cheeky little like button. That would be amazing. And if this kind of content is right up your street, then I'd love you to subscribe to our channel. It'd be great to welcome you to our community. Be sure to click on the screen in a second for the next video, content that is dedicated to helping business owners and entrepreneurs get the very best out of video to help their businesses grow. So some really useful stuff coming up. In the meantime, thanks for watching, take care, and see you in the next video. Cheers.